I am so deep in my calling.
Huge. That's a huge statement.
And it's accurate.
Hear that. Hear that. That's a huge statement.
As you know, I work for the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm an audio engineer. And there's nothing about that screams out ministry, right?
Nope.
However, I've worked with them since the team moved to Oklahoma City, so it's not new. But my capacity with them, I've been in this capacity for the last 2 years, 2 seasons. And we just won a championship, so that's exciting. But separate and apart. About 18 months ago, I spoke with one of my bosses. I'm a contractor, so boss is a loose term, but one of the guys that's my boss. And I just looked him in the face and I said, I just want you to know something. I am not here because I love to do audio engineering. I said, I feel called to be here in a ministry capacity. Yep. I said those words. And he looked at me and he's like, he's a guy, I married him and his wife, so like we have that relationship. And he thought it was cool, but what was interesting is I wasn't looking for any kind of response. I was looking for an understanding of why I'm in the place that I'm in. I'm not moved about because of circumstance there, because I'm there as a calling. And so I shared that with a couple other people since that time. And I've since found out that in conversation, that revelation, that me saying that has made it to the very top of management at the arena, at the Thunder. Mm-hmm. They have specifically said, Jeremy's not here for this. He feels called to be here. And I don't know the impact that's made to this point. But what I do know is being called to be there, knowing that, putting a voice to that, saying it out loud, really got me looking at what I do with that opportunity. I work with another engineer who's gone through some pretty significant tragedy, and the tragedy happened after I had made that statement, after I had settled into that. Mm-hmm. And so I became a point of, I talk to him all the time, and there hasn't been a week go by where we haven't discussed that tragedy, and it's been over a year now. I've been in ministry for him. The other interesting thing that has happened, and this is one that I love because it actually happened before I made the statement. I had 3 different staff members randomly say these words to me, and they all said the exact same words. And you will hear, when I tell you what they said, you'll recognize that's not a common phrase for humans to say in general.
Okay.
Especially in the context of audio engineering and an NBA franchise. Okay. They said,
Let's keep it in context.
Exactly. They said, there is just such a peace when you're here.
Wow.
And they 2 of them elaborated and said, I feel at peace when you're here. Christ is the Prince of Peace.
Yes.
So I'm bringing Christ into that environment, and I don't have to, I can still hook up an XLR cable. You know what I mean?
Sure. But here's the importance of that, is that you defined your identity, and they confirmed it.
Yeah, sure.
They confirmed that Christ is in you.
Yeah.
And that is our identity, Christ in us.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's the coolest thing to me about this. I spent 30 years of my life, roughly, we'll call it 25 years of my life being a worship pastor at a church. And man, if my identity was wrapped up in that, we'd be in some real trouble. And I'm glad you mentioned identity, because that's really the thing. We begin to make our calling our identity.
Yep.
And that can be troubling.
Wow. Huge statement.
Right?
That can be a huge problem.
I had a
Because
friend,
it leads to the next question.
Okay, good. Well,
Finish your thought.
Yeah, I'll say this. So I had a friend who was is a pastor, and everyone referred to him as pastor in his name, right? And we were looking at helping him get some retirement and changing some leadership structure. Anyway, I recommended that they change his title from pastor to founding pastor, for example. Mm-hmm. And he said something subconsciously, because I don't think he truly has any big struggle with this. Maybe, I don't know. But he said, if I'm not pastor, fill in the blank, who am I?
Ooh.
And my response was immediately, you're a child of God, bro. Which one would you prefer? Which title do you want?
Yeah.
You know, and it's easy for me to say that, right? I wasn't in that moment.
Right.
For him, it was like a shot to his gut about his identity.
Right.
But I think that that's so gargantuanly huge.
Absolutely.
We are not our calling. We just aren't. Our identity is what I just said. We are a child of God. That's your title. That's your position.
That's exactly right.
Calling is your hobby. It's not your hobby.
If you wrap your identity into your calling, then you set yourself up for burnout.
Oh, 100%.
And that's my next question. Did you get burned out, or you just decided that what you were doing wasn't for you?
Well,
anymore?
Yeah, I definitely,
Did someone ask you to walk away?
All can be true. There's 2 points in my life I think I got burnout, and I think you get burnout not because you're outside of your call. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons. I can tell you why I got burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I got burnout because I expected things wrongly, not with me specific, but like I expected other humans to have the same. I don't want to downplay what they have. What I want to say is passion and drive. I'm not saying they don't have it.
Well, let's boil it down to think like you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. I expected other humans to think like me and subsequently act like me, and that was stupid. In hindsight, of course, that's not going to be the case.
Right.
I just turned 49. Most of this stuff happened 10 years ago, recently 5 years ago, probably, but. There's lots of learning that happens in that gap, but
sure.
So that's a huge part. When you have that expectation, you're constantly being disappointed, and you feel like what you're doing is hampered. When you're in ministry, like working at a church, you don't feel isolated. You shouldn't feel. You should feel part of a team,
right,
all working towards the same goal. When you feel isolated, that's when you get burnt out, because now you're on an island by yourself. Even if you're not, if you're feeling that way,
yep.
And that's all just a matter of expectations and various other things. Additionally, if you're working in a performance mindset, if I'm doing what I'm doing to try to please God, for sure, that's not good. But if I'm doing it to try to please other people, man, you're totally going to be burnt out. You're not going to do that.
Yeah, because half of them aren't going to like it.
Well, and here's the problem. No one talks about this. Pleasing people, I mean, sometimes they do. If you're pleasing your leadership, doesn't necessarily you're pleasing God. It doesn't mean that they're not collectively together.
Right.
If my leadership wants me to focus on, like if I'm at a church and they're like, hey, I really want you to focus all your evangelism on Fortune 500 CEOs. Well, I don't think by default that pleases. I mean, there's a motive problem, right?
Okay. The problem with this pleases God, that's irrelevant because he's already pleased.
Sure. And right. And not only that, and who are you to tell me how I'm pleasing God? Like that, talk about putting someone in between me and God. That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
So yeah, all that stuff leads to burnout. But what happened for me is every time I was, the first time I was burning out, I actually had health repercussions. Like I was feeling it in my body and essentially stepped away for that. The second time, because of the first time, I was recognizing the warning signs. So I'm like, okay, I could say this is external problems, but the fact that it happened the first time, I changed the external. I quit the church I was working at. I changed things about my life. My health recovered. Okay, great. But we got there again, and everything's different. But so obviously this is a me problem. So I approached it totally different the second time, and I asked for a sabbatical so that I could so I could fix myself. I went into a week-long therapeutic retreat thing. Super helpful. It was weird because I didn't know this going into it, but it was for addiction, and I didn't have any standard nameable addiction.
Right.
So I found myself, when I was asked what my addiction was, I spoke out some truth that I didn't even know was there, but I said, I'm addicted to accomplishment. Wow. And boy, did that bring some revelation to me. But in that, so, and another way of putting that is I was performance based. so I, in my own self, that's the crazy thing.
Yep.
Didn't project it on anybody else. Didn't expect it from anybody else, but I sure expected it from myself.
Well, you say those words, but the attitude
well,
affects the people around you.
Absolutely
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in that I kind of
Because
recovered.
I want you to know that when I first met you
Yeah.
in that job you had,
Yeah.
I thought you were a jerk.
Oh, I know. You told me that.
Yeah.
You were wrong. I wasn't even a jerk then. You're just a bad judge of character.
I am, apparently.
But what ended up happening in that time, I reckoned with all of that. I found some wounds from when I was a kid and different things. And so I dealt with all that, but, or am dealing still. That's the word.
Yeah. You're in Oklahoma. You can say steel.
Oh, there we go. So, so when I came back, weird timing. I came back, and then 2 days later, the country shut down because of COVID.
Oh.
So I was on a sabbatical for 60 days. I can't remember now how long. But again, I went right back home, and we didn't stay. You know, our time away wasn't as long as the other people. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I basically since that time in 2020, I kind of stopped working in the church. Because even when I came back and things kind of got back to normal, they weren't normal. And then by September of that year, August of that same year, I was out. And I always worded it that I got fired. None of the board members worded it that way, but I knew I was a rub for different people.
I mean, it probably felt like you got fired.
Oh, I got fired.
Yeah.
No question. Because I was a rub for people. What I said, I asked one person in particular, I just said, hey, do you want me to leave? And he said, yeah. Now, but they were in a rock and a hard place. I mean, what do you say to people when you fire somebody for nothing?
Yeah.
Right? Like, they couldn't say what I did wrong or anything like that. So, because they didn't do anything wrong. I just wasn't a good fit. And churches have struggled with that, right? And it wasn't that I wasn't a good fit. It's that I was transitioning. I still think sometimes you can look at the situation. This is some things that I think could happen there. I feel like even still today that what happened with me was handled poorly. I think the majority of them would agree with that. But what happens is you kind of look at those circumstances and you go, well, the end result's good. Mm-hmm. And I would agree the end result's good. Mm-hmm. But that's like saying, when I get a chance, I really want to thank those guards who nailed Jesus' hands to the cross. Because without them, we wouldn't have had it.
We wouldn't have.
That's stupid. Right?
Right.
You know what I mean, is it true? Sort of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we don't celebrate those guys. We celebrate what Christ did. I'm not putting myself in that position. I'm just simply saying a bad thing happening isn't something where we're like, well, I'm glad we did it, you know? But in the end, because I think I would have ended here anyway. I think I still would have landed here because what got me to where I am with the Oklahoma City Thunder right now is completely separate from where my life had been or was. If I was still working at that church the day that they called me, it wouldn't have changed anything. I would have still been at the Thunder because they weren't asking me to quit my day job. They were asking me to come back and work in a different capacity with them. And so the idea, because I still have my own company and you know I work in a technical field, so I still do some of those other things. I just don't have to. Financially, I don't have to. I can just work with the Thunder. Right. So anyway, I think that's the thing. There's a lot there that could get unpacked, I suppose. But
my question now is, did you experience being angry with the people who handled it poorly? And did you experience being angry at God?
Never was angry at God.
Well, how did you,
ever.
So how have you dealt with the emotion that you encountered after you were asked to leave?
I don't know. Best anyone can. I mean, I was angry. I'm still not. That's the right word. There are people there that I have no desire to ever talk to. I'm not mad at them. It's kind of like this. There's a guy out in the middle. You're in a neighborhood. We're shooting this in a residential area. Mm-hmm. It's not that I don't care about your neighbor. I don't know your neighbor. Right. What do you do with it, right? So there was a great video my wife sent me years ago about a lady talking, and she said, it's not that I don't like you, it's that I nothing you, right? I don't have emotion about you.
Right.
So what happens when trust is violated, you can forgive, but you don't just throw yourself back out there for trust to be violated again.
Right.
So for me, that's kind of where I'm at. I would argue my wife is in way worse shape than I am still about it.
Yeah.
But she's just protective, and for me, what I do is this.
Good wife.
She's a great wife.
Yep.
The reason I can function and why I don't have I would say I don't have any animosity is because I recognize the why. Sometimes that's really all it takes. You don't have to be okay with it. But when you understand the why, when you know that with the different individuals,
that's good.
They were in, this is their past. They struggle with this too. You can go down the list. I know that even a person who set out, if this was the case, if they set out to get to this end result for their own selfish gain, I can still sleep at night without having animosity towards them because something got them to that point. It wasn't me, and it probably is nobody in their life right now.
Yeah.
It's something where they struggle with their own self-worth, their own value, and this is what happened as a result.
And a lot of that just boils down to they don't know who they are.
Oh, man, 100%.
Yeah.
And when you do that, right, they don't know who they are, then I look at it with compassion. I look at it with empathy. I can feel that. And so I feel bad for them. But again, I don't, I wouldn't avoid them. I remember one person asked me, because of the work that I do, it was very conceivable that one of the individuals who was pretty key in the situation would reach out to me for help in the work that I do. And they asked if I would help them. And I said, well, sure. And they could not believe that was my answer. And I'm like, well, God's not done using them. And what I'm doing is going to help them do what God's called them to do. Of course, I'm going to help them because I don't see my gifting, my skill set. I don't see myself as my own. If God presents the same kind of thing, I wake up today, there's an opportunity. If I got a phone call from that person today, will you help with this? I would reach out to them and see how I could help, because the whole point is that we are all in the kingdom, right? So I'm just trying to do my portion. And if God needs me to do this piece over here, or wants me is a better way, I don't think he needs me to do anything. If he wants me to do this over here, two things. One, it's going to help that person. And two, it's going to help me.
Yep. There is nothing in the rule books that says if you're angry with somebody and then you've forgiven them, that means you've released them from a debt.
Right.
And so can you stand in that release? And if they call you and say, will you help me? Because you've released them, you can say, sure.
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you need to trust them again.
Right. Sure. And it's categorical trust, right?
Yeah.
Like I say this all the time. I was literally asked by that person if I trusted them.
Well, how can I?
And the funny thing is, I said, well, I trust that you would keep all of my children alive. I 100%.
Yeah.
If I were to categorize it, I would say this: I don't trust that you would put my interest over yours in any circumstance. That's probably true of most people, right? That doesn't even mean I don't, because literally, what my example before, your neighbor, I don't trust your neighbor would put my interest over theirs.
Nope.
Most people won't. It's the friendship. Christ said it, that a friend sticks closer than a brother, because I choose. You and I are friends because of a mutual choice. Mm-hmm. I choose you, you choose me. And that is a strong bond. Family members don't choose.
Exactly.
They don't choose.
Yeah.
And so it totally makes sense to me.
If they do choose, they choose to separate.
Well, sure.
That's the choice they face.
And they can choose, as I think Jesus' brothers did, they can choose to step into that role that becomes the friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Absolutely.
But everyone still has that choice. And so by that regard, because it sounds so mean, right? I don't trust you to put me. No, it's just life. Everyone on the interstate highway will not put their interest over yours.
Right.
And there are always exceptions, but the vast majority of people are going to live that way. And those exceptions are often called heroes, but it's also response things. If you see a wreck on the side of the road, there are people that will pull over.
There is.
The vast majority will drive past for a bunch of reasons. I'm much more of a drive past guy because I recognize I'm probably in the way.
Yeah. And if I see somebody's there helping them, then I will get in the way.
Be in the way.
I won't be any help. So I'll pass by.